you joining us through the live stream, and those of you who will be watching in the future. We're so delighted to have Dr. Jennifer Bryson here to present on her translation of Ida Friederike Görres' John Henry Newman, A Life Sacrificed. She and I practiced that a little bit earlier because I needed some help. My name is Angelica Tom. I'm the Senior Director of Operations here at the Catholic Information Center. And I also want to thank our wonderful program co-sponsor, the Institute of Human Ecology at Catholic University, more formally, informally known as IHE everywhere. We're joined by two of their colleagues here, Tony Falcone and Nate Svogen. They will also be helping you get a glass of wine and a beer later on. So it'll be a great evening where we'll start with Dr. Bryson's talk, followed by a time of Q&A, followed by an opportunity for you to buy the book, as well as enjoy a light happy hour. Now, let me introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Bryson. She is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C., in the Catholic Women's Forum. She is the translator from German to English of The Church in the Flesh, and what she will be discussing tonight, John Henry Newman, A Life Sacrifice. She's currently translating several other works by Ida Görres. Her previous work has included the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Hudson Institute, and the Witherspoon Institute. She has a wonderful long biography. She lives in Lincoln, Nebraska as well, and is a very creative force and has an amazing coloring book. Is that right? Okay, so we should do a talk on that one day. Her BA is from Stanford University in political science with an MA from Yale in history and a PhD from Yale in Greco-Arabic and Islamic studies from the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations. As an undergraduate at Stanford, she studied Marxism, Leninism for 2 semesters at the Karl Marx University in the former East Germany. And it was in this time in East Germany that played an important role in her conversion, right, into the Catholic Church. On her website, you can actually watch a video of her story, which is conversion from studying Marxism in East Germany into the Catholic Church. Incredible. That's not something you often hear. So let me get out of the way and present Dr. Jennifer Bryson as she discusses John Henry Newman, A Life Sacrificed by Ida Görres.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the work of the CIC and the opportunity to be here. I am going to speak only briefly about the life of Ida Görres, so that I can get into focusing on this particular book. If you want to learn more about her, in The Church in the Flesh, I added an essay that's not in the original German edition that was written by a Catholic about Ida Görres in 1961 by Alphonse Rosenberg. And also in John Henry Newman, A Life Sacrificed, the German editor included a timeline of the life of Ida Görres. So those are a few of the resources. Unfortunately, however, there are not a lot of resources about her, but you can access some of her works. She was born in 1901 in Bohemia in the Habsburg Empire. Her father was a Habsburg Empire diplomat, and her mother was Japanese. Her father had met her mother in Japan when he was stationed there. She was an author throughout her entire life. She married in 1934, but unfortunately she and her husband experienced infertility, which I mention in particular because it became part of how it was that she became such a prolific author. She wrote throughout her entire life and really saw her vocation as being a wife to her husband and a Catholic author for Catholics in the world. She was already a published author of books by the early 1930s, and already her very first book that she published was translated into English right away within a year and picked up by Christopher Dawson and included in one of his series. And it's no coincidence that that book was on the nature of sanctity, because hagiography would be at the center of her work for the rest of her life. There are other topics that she writes extensively on, such as the church. She also had a very deep concern and I think beautiful, wonderful insights about the anthropology of man and woman and the importance of marriage. But this first great love of hers that we keep seeing in her work is hagiography, which is going to bring us to our book today. Already in the 1930s, she wrote on Venerable Mary Ward, St. Joan of Arc, St. Radegund, and this question of, well, what is sanctity? During World War II, she spent a great deal of her time, in addition to dealing with the tremendous struggles of World War II and being a Catholic in that environment, on there are two main projects. One is that she was deeply concerned about the danger of the Nazi image of woman that was being presented to young girls, and especially to young girls who were forced to be in the Nazi youth organizations. And so she edited 3 volumes, of which she wrote some parts of them, on short stories and essays to help present a healthy counter-image of an authentic understanding of being a female in the world and growing into womanhood. And her other project during this time was her deep research into the life of Saint Therese of Lisieux. And so by the end of the war, she publishes the work that's considered her masterpiece, The Hidden Face on Saint Therese. Right away after the end of World War II, she turns to St. John Henry Newman. So before getting into the book, I'd like to address, well, why Newman and why then, right at the end of World War II? During the 19-teens and 1920s, John Henry Newman is already becoming well known to German-speaking Catholics. In, I believe it's 1908, there's a biography of him by Lady Charlotte Blennerhassett, and Ida Görres quotes from that biography in this book. We're also starting to see the translation of Newman's works from English into German by Theodor Hecker, an important intellectual Catholic convert, and others. And that is happening in the Catholic youth movement milieu, where Ida Friederike Görres is very deeply formed and has her life really changed and inspired as a Catholic. Skipping now to right after World War II, we have German-speaking Catholics looking out onto a world where they've just come out of the horror of World War II, and there's a lot of deep soul searching about looking for a new way forward, a new way to be Catholic in the world, a sharp turn from what they've had while still being rooted within their faith. And it's in that context that Ida Görres says what Catholics are going to need is John Henry Newman. I think it's interesting, Newman is so important to German-speaking Catholics at this point that in 1945, which was the 100th anniversary of the conversion of Newman, that in England, they didn't have a big event. I heard that they decided because of the situation with the war just ending, they were going to postpone it. Whereas the German Catholics, who were in a much worse situation and in rubble, that this is so important and we need Newman right now, that they had an event for him already in the fall of 1945. I think it was in Cologne. We also see the development of very sophisticated, in-depth adult Catholic education right after World War II, with this concern that Catholics have just come through a period when they've often been disconnected from the resources for their faith, and we need to prepare them now for a world that is modern and different. And a key part of these adult education programs were lectures on Newman. And some of the organizers of these programs included the siblings of the Scholl siblings who had been martyred during the war. So they carry on this legacy of faith. And Ida Görres is one of the people who's lecturing on Newman during this time. We're also starting to see deep splits emerging within German Catholicism that I find are more pronounced than at other previous periods. There is an out with the old, tear it all down wing emerging and starting to feel empowered. There is a back to the past wing. And there is another realm of the old guides us to the new. And I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's my rough breakdown of the three streams I see. And Ida Görres at this point is falling into the old, guides us to the new, and our guide for that is going to be Newman. Now, I'd like to talk about the structure of the book and what kind of a book this is. It actually has three quite distinct sections. The first section, chapters 1 through 8, is a life of Newman with brief chapters. And I would describe this as part biography. Ida Görres' hagiography is always very rooted in her studies of primary source material, and she's providing that. But it's also a vita of a saint. Although Newman hadn't been canonized at the time, Ida Görres saw him as a really exceptionally holy man. And because she had studied the lives of so many saints and also the Catholic tradition of how we write about the saints, I see elements in these first 8 chapters. And these first 8 chapters are focused in part on her trying to explain her insights about what she thinks is the spiritual meaning of Newman's life. And this is that he was a man who sacrificed, which is a somewhat unusual angle from which to approach Newman. In chapter 9, we have what I believe, and I will share with you my little secret, is the key that unlocks chapters 1 through 8. And this is that in chapter 9, she chose 2 poems to share. And they are poems by Newman. One is The Death of Moses, and the other is The Two Worlds. And I encourage readers to slow down at those chapters, spend time with the poems. And when I read those poems, which in the German edition were kind of stuck in at the back, and Newman wrote so much, and I thought, well, it's nice, he wrote some poetry. But when I got into those poems, the light bulb started to go off, and I saw why she had chosen those 2. And I think they really sort of shine a light onto chapters 1 through 8. So that's section 1 of the book. Section 2 of the book is on conscience. This is a long, almost standalone monograph. She's definitely continuing the work of chapters 1 through 8, but I put it in a separate section, labeled part 2 to kind of alert the reader, okay, you're going to need to shift gears here. It is, as I said, it's long and in-depth. Ida Görres felt that the question of conscience was absolutely essential for mid and late 20th century Catholics. She was very concerned about the rising effort to have moral questions addressed only through through academic means, what the Germans would want to call wissenschaftlich, as if one could discern moral decisions strictly through reason alone, disconnected from any transcendence. And Ida Görres thought this was very dangerous, and she really appreciated how much Newman helps us on these questions. And something that's interesting in her book that I'll get to is she draws on some different sources than some of the other treatments of Newman on conscience. Part 3 of the book is actually a separate sketch that she wrote about Newman in 1955, but fortunately the editor of the book included it in this so that we get sort of a full package about how Ida Görres viewed Newman. I want to mention also I've created a free study guide for this book, And it has questions to reflect on all of the chapters as well as the poems. And it's designed can be for the classroom, for book clubs, but it's also designed for personal use. And a number of people who have read the book on their own have said to me they found the study guide helped them reflect more deeply and see common themes throughout the chapters. It's free online, and the CIC is going to include a link to the free study guide when they send out a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the video. I want to comment on how this book came into print, because it's really it remains amazing to me that I'm standing here holding this in my hand now. Not only that it's English, but that it came into print at all. Ida Görres did not publish this book during her lifetime. While the people who were close around her knew that she had been working on something on Newman, and her dear friend, Walter Nigg, who was, interestingly enough, a Reformed Catholic with a specialist in hagiography, he encouraged her to try to finish it. But when she died in 1971, in her extensive corpus that was left behind, there was nothing on Newman, other than that she mentions Newman in quite a few of her works. So now we zoom ahead to the 1990s, and an archivist who had been handling some of the papers of Ida Görres delivers a box to a scholar in Munich, and he is a German scholar of Newman. And in this box are note cards and draft chapters for an entire book on Newman by Ida Görres. However, this German scholar dies, and a relative of Ida Görres calls Hannah Barbara Gell-Falkowitz, terrific, wonderful German theologian, scholar of Guardini, Edith Stein, and she herself is a great lover of Ida Görres. And this relative of Ida Görres calls her and says, "Barbara, you've got to drive to Munich. This German scholar has passed away, and they're giving away all of his papers that he's left behind. And if you hurry, you can get this manuscript of the Newman book, because who knows where it would have gone. It perhaps would have gone to somebody who didn't have such an interest in finally bringing it to print." So she gets in her car, drives down to Munich, gets the manuscript. And so that's in the late 90s. And then it takes her until 2011 to get it published in German, because the manuscript, the pages were out of order, some chapters weren't quite complete, there was some duplication. It just took her a very long time. And she had so many other demands on her time. And I've asked her, why did you persevere in getting this book done, especially at a time when the German Catholics were going in a direction where nobody was paying attention to Ida Görres? And she said, I just could tell that she really had something to contribute on this topic. And so it's a marvel that it got into German. And then once I found the book, I was really blessed by ignorance, that I didn't know how hard it was going to be to translate. Getting this book into English was much harder than the other translations I've done, because the book is in German, but she's using English sources, and I've got to find the primary sources. And because the book wasn't completed, it was missing over 50% of the citations. It was a crazy project. But as I say, I'm really grateful that I was ignorant, because I'm not sure I would have started had I known. And I'm very thankful today that Ignatius Press has brought this book out, so it's available to English-speaking readers. I'd like to close by discussing what distinguished this book from others on Newman. I think the key factor is her insight about the centrality of sacrifice in Newman's life. And not only that he had to sacrifice, but the holiness with which he handled needing to make sacrifices in his pursuit of a higher truth. The second is what Dr. Gell-Falkowitz told me in an interview, what she labeled the hidden heart of Newman. And here, Dr. Gail Falkovits is playing off of the hidden face of Saint Therese. And Dr. Gail Falkovits told me that she thinks that something that really distinguishes this book is that Ida Görres is able to get through the layers of Newman into his hidden heart. And as much as Ida Görres loves and respects his intellect, she wants to help take us down into his heart and his soul. So that hidden heart comes out in these pages. The third is her contribution to the topic of conscience. And in this, she draws very extensively on Newman's sermons, which I have not seen in some of the other treatments of Newman on conscience. And translating this book was also a lesson for me that helped me really to appreciate the sermons of Newman. And so you'll get a taste of some of those because she has a lot of long quotations from the sermons in this book, especially in that chapter. And the fourth distinguishing characteristic is that Ida Görres situates Newman's role for Catholics. She says in the 20th century, and I'm going to take the liberty of extending that from the 20th into the 21st century. And so she looks on Newman not only as somebody who was an incredibly important voice in his time, but she saw Newman as a Catholic who was keenly aware that in the West, he was starting to live within a whole paradigm shift of worldviews. And that being Catholic in this context and bringing the gospel to the world was going to involve understanding how much the world around him and around us was changing. And thus, in the final two sentences of her sketch of Newman from 1955, and these are the last two sentences of the book, Ida Görres writes for us that John Henry Newman was Church Father of the 20th century, explicitly the 20th, that is a lighthouse in the rotation of the stars, strangely having two faces. One is the familiar one that is already fading. The other is only beginning to reveal itself and to shine like a rising star in our great darkness. Morning star, not the evening star of a cherished but sinking culture, humanism, etc., rather the morning star of a free, lonely, believing spirituality. And with that, I would love to hear from you. For those of you who have read the book, if there's thoughts on it you want to share about what's distinctive about this book, and I'm wide open to your questions.
Just raise your hand and I will come over with the microphone so the people at home watching will be able to hear you through the video.
Thank you. I don't think supernatural belief was difficult for Newman. He was all in. Nowadays, debates about faith and reason are around us all the time. We have books, Spencer Clavin, Light of the World, different things. There are a lot being written about that. Newman, I think, was kind of a precursor to this faith, versus reason debate. And he brings a lot to it. We know so much now through science. Why is Newman not viewed as somebody who is sort of the person that kind of modernized faith in terms of understanding science, understanding all the things that humans understand, yet at the same time transcending that appreciation of science to having supernatural belief?
Mm-hmm. I think that Ida Görres sort of answers your question in the passage I just read, where she said that there's a face of Newman that's familiar to us, the Newman of the past into the the 19th century, but another face of Newman that's only beginning to reveal itself and shine like a rising star in our great darkness. And so that's where we have opportunities today to get to know Newman better and see what he has to say to us today. So that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Is there, you talked about how she emphasizes sort of the aspect of suffering that Newman went through. Is there a point in his life where he suffered that she really emphasizes, maybe his retreat from his academic position, or is there something that she really hones in on?
There isn't just one, because she sees it as a pattern, but a few passages that come to mind is it, and she opens by saying, yes, Newman was a great intellectual, but she said, I don't think that's the most important thing. Instead, it's the spirit of sacrifice. And the sacrifice comes in very personal ways. For example, separation from friends at his conversion. In one group that I discussed this book with, somebody who's read quite a bit on Newman said to me, I was unaware how much Newman had suffered, how much pain he went through. She helps to bring that out in a delicate way that I think avoids being overdramatic. Also, she highlights what a kind of astonishing string he went through of seeming like he was set up to be like this huge, all success Catholic figure, but that projects where it seemed like he could have had a great impact kept being impeded by the environment being not quite right, others having other interests and not wanting Newman to be the one doing this and that. So she really takes us through a sort of again and again and again. He keeps facing these difficulties, but instead of becoming bitter, he's able to let go and sacrifice for the sake of something that greater that God's calling him to.
Okay, how wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer Bryson, for your talk tonight. And I thank everyone for joining us here. I don't want to get feedback. And to those of you at home, please share this video with friends who you know are interested in John Henry Newman. And I will say that I was told by one of the attendees tonight that this was the best book he has read in 10 years. So, and he is a smarty pants. So, and a man of good heart. So thank you so much. Please come back to the CIC. We have a number of events that are happening, including our Eucharistic procession on Saturday, May 17th. And now is time for you to get this book. We have a special little incentive to buy the book, John Henry Newman. We will give you, we have a little bit of a surplus, so we will, if you don't mind raising this up, Jennifer, we will give you a copy of Church in the Flesh as well on us as a thank you for being here tonight. And you're going to get, do you have that copy? No. Then we'll get you one because this is your biggest fan. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
And thank you all. And please come and join us in the bookstore for a night of fun and fellowship.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was great. You're great. And to the point. So